Hello, everyone. My name is Abby, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the young adult assistant at the Twin Lakes Library System. So, today for Must Read Monday, I wanted to talk about fantasy standalone books that we have in our collection. So, I always kind of talk about how I really enjoy series, but I know some people don't enjoy series, and sometimes I just want to read one book in one world and not come back to it or like be done with it because I'm busy or I can't really keep up with the series at that time. So there are luckily some options out for people like that and like me whenever I want those kind of books. So today I'm going to be talking about two different books in our collection. And the first book that I'm going to be talking about is The Shadows Between Us by Tricia Levenseller. And Common Sense Media recommends this one for ages 15 and up, and as you can see, it is in our physical library collection, so that is a way for you to get it if you choose to read this. So, this book is about, our main character is Alessandra, and she is the second daughter of a lord, and Alessandra is pretty used to being looked over because she is the second daughter, because her father prefers her older sister, but she wants a lot of things in life, and she knows exactly what she wants in life. She wants to become very powerful, and she wants to be wealthy, and she wants to be ambitious, and she wants to do all of these things. So Alessandra plots to do all of this, that she's going to win the heart of the king, the Shadow King, marry him, and then kill him after their wedding night. So that would therefore make her the most powerful person in the kingdom because she's the queen and she wouldn't have to share any of that power because the king would be dead. So she plots all of these things and she makes herself, very present in the king's court and in the palace. She brings a lot of attention to herself. She's not like a lot of the other women who are in her court. She's very outspoken. She's a trendsetter. She feels very powerful and she knows what she wants, and she doesn't really adhere to tradition and the traditional ways that women are thought about in the court. So people start to notice her, and one of those people is in fact the king. But Alessandra discovers that there's actually an assassin that has been sent to kill the Shadow King, and she has to keep him alive long enough to marry him and then kill him so she can get his power. But then, she starts to develop feelings, and she's not really sure what she's going to do about this assassin and this king, and that's all I'm going to say. So why I liked this book. So it has what the author calls a Slytherin romance, and I actually think that's kind of accurate. If you are a fan of the enemies to lovers trope like I am in your books, I really recommend this one because they do start out as enemies and then it gets romantic. And I think they have a really cool character and relationship dynamic, and they play off of each other really well. The next reason I really like this is because Alessandra, I think, is actually a really cool female lead. She's very powerful. She's very unabashedly herself. But she's also very layered and complex. And I saw this somewhere when I was reading reviews for this book as well, and I think this is very accurate. But sometimes books feel like they either have to be really mean main characters and unlikable, or really kind, kind of weak sometimes characters, but this book does a good job of mixing the two into Alessandra, making her very three-dimensional female character. I think this book is super fast-paced. It's very gripping. Something is always happening. I think every chapter has something pretty big happen in it, which keeps you really drawn into the story, and it's also just very entertaining. I think it would make like a fun movie or TV show just because the characters are fun, the plot points are really fun. So I think it would play really well on screen, just because I feel like it would keep you enraptured the whole time. And then the last thing is the world that Tricia Levenseller built is really cool. It's kind of like a weird mix, not like weird, but like a cool mix of modern and new tradition, like stuff you would see in like a typical fantasy story that's intermixed with more modern inventions and concepts that I think she just did really well when she was writing this book. So The second book that I have to talk to you about today is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones, and Common Sense Media does not have a age recommendation for this. Personally, I would say probably maybe 14 or 15, just because I think it's a little gory, but that's up to you. And again, this is in our physical library collection, so if you decide that you want to read it, you can check it out from the library. So, this book follows Rin, and Rin is a gravedigger, and she's been a gravedigger for a very long time, and she cares about her family and digging graves. And her siblings have been trying to get by in their village, Colburn, since the death of their parents. So Rin, she works as a gravedigger. She takes care of the dead in this town, and she does everything she can to sort of support her family. But her job is a little more complicated and interesting than you would think, because in Colburn, the dead actually come to life at night. So Rin calls these undead dead bone houses, and they're supposedly remnants of an old curse that was placed a long time ago. And she keeps them at bay. They sort of stay in the forest. They're like a problem, but they're not as big a deal as they could be. But then after a map maker comes into town, Ellis, the bone houses start to attack with more ferocity, and they start coming into town, and it becomes much more dangerous for everyone for them to be around. So Rin and Ellis sort of team up, and they are on a journey to sort of find a way to stop these bone houses from attacking people and hurting people before it ends up destroying her village and hurting people. So why I loved this. This was a really cool and refreshing take on zombies and zombie books. I feel like a lot of times you get like the pretty stereotypical slow dead, but I just think this was a cool concept, the way that the author describes them, the way that Rin describes them, the way they're sort of depicted, the way they act is really interesting. It's just a really cool take on a pretty old concept, and it was really refreshing to see done. And just even the whole, like, not even calling them zombies, calling them bone houses, that's really creative and I think super fun. And just, I liked that a lot. And I'm not really even like a big zombie book fan or zombie movie fan or Walking Dead, but I really enjoyed this, and I think it would be good for anyone who isn't like a zombie book fan either. I think you would enjoy this just because, like, they're there, obviously, they're the big element of the book, but it's not so heavy-handed, and it's different than like what you're used to. The next thing I really liked about this was Rin. She's a fun main character. I liked following her. I thought she was interesting and really complex. I think she's really powerful. She really loves her axe. She cares very deeply about her family. It's very important to her. And it just made her someone I wanted to root for as this was going on. And then to sort of go on to, I think Ellis and Rin together are another reason I really liked this. You're pretty much following them for most of the book. There's not a lot of like side characters that you run into after the beginning of the book, but they have a really good character dynamic, and I think they balance each other out really well, because Rin is a little more tough around the edges, where Ellis is a little more vulnerable and emotional, and they sort of like deepen each other's like personalities and like their strengths, and they just interact really well with each other. The next thing, the world. The world is so well constructed and super well illustrated. You will feel like you're there. I felt like I was in a lot of the settings when I was reading this. I read like over 200 pages of this book in one sitting, so I enjoyed it a lot, and I felt like I was really there in a lot of the scenes. The forest is really well done. You can really envision the kingdoms that are talked about. You can envision the village that Rin is from. It's super well executed. And then just like further like character descriptions too are really well done. Like the way the bone houses are described are really like visual. You can it's gross, but like you can picture them in your head and you can see like what the author was going for. So that was really cool. The next thing I really liked is the goat. And I'm not going to explain that because it's spoilers, but you'll know what I mean if you read this. The goat is great. The next thing I liked, okay, this is not a big part of the book at all, but I did think that the romance element of the book was done well. It wasn't like overwhelming and it didn't happen immediately or anything. It was well executed. It was well paced and I appreciated it. I don't necessarily think this book needed a romance, but because the author decided to put one in there, she did a good job in the way that she wrote it and presented it to the reader. This book is also heartfelt. It actually made me tear up in a couple places, just because they talk about some harder themes and addressing it in terms of grieving, in terms of, family love, in terms of like loneliness and isolation. And I really appreciated how much depth was brought into this and how deep this novel was. Despite it being a zombie novel, there was a lot of emotion and passion and thought and, questions and conversation about morality and how to grieve loved ones and stuff that I enjoyed a lot. And then the last thing that I really liked is I think the action scenes are really well written in this book. They left you anticipating a lot. They left you really scared for the main character. I got really stressed sometimes when I was reading this because like, oh my goodness, what if a bone house gets them? Or what if this time they're not as lucky? Because there are moments where you're very worried that it's going to happen, that they're finally going to get these bone houses are going to take them out. So it was stressful, but like a good kind of stressful. It means it was a well executed book because it is supposed to be a horror novel, a horror fantasy novel. So, I was impressed by that. Sometimes it's hard for me to worry about my characters because I don't feel as connected to them, but I was deeply worried about all of these characters. And then I did want to quickly add that the Bone Houses is actually a Peach nominated book this year. So I talked about those at the very beginning of the Must Read Mondays, but this is also on the list of Peach nominated books. So something just to add in there to talk about. It's a claim. So those are my 2 recommendations, and thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.